This is Community Radio, KSQD Santa Cruz, 90.7 FM. I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. That was Mimi Hall, the director of the Watsonville Hospital Project, hoping to keep the Watsonville Hospital in our community for years to come. Coming up next, there's a new study out that says Santa Cruz is the top city for working from home and getting outdoors. What's that going to do to our town, knowing that? Is it already changing the way people work and live in this town? Here to talk about that is Julianne Ohlander. She joins us here to talk about the survey and how they did it and what it might mean for our town. Hi, Julianne. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great to hear from you. So tell us how you came up with Santa Cruz as the number one city for working from home. What were some of the criteria you surveyed other cities about?
Well, this is our third installment of Zoom Town. So during the pandemic, opened up the chance for people to work remotely from wherever they liked. People no longer have to prioritize, proximity to the office when they decide where they can live. So we decided to look at cities across the U.S. and rank them according to different factors that we thought would be important in deciding where to live, considering that people were no longer tethered to the office. So we looked at a variety of factors such as broadband and Wi-Fi access, walkability, public parkland, proximity to parks. We looked at rent and housing costs. We looked at other things that people would consider important, access to restaurants, co-working spaces, affordable childcare. So we looked at a variety of different factors and gathered them for over 400 cities in the U.S. and ranked them. And yes, Santa Cruz came out on top.
And I should have you introduce yourself a little more thoroughly. Who is we? When you said we,
Sorry.
I forgot to tell people who you work for.
I work for Ownlerly. So we are we have a search engine for property. So people want to look up their property and find out information. You can come to ownerly.com. So we work on data studies that are related to housing and neighborhoods and things like that. So our team, has done several data studies, and this is just.
You are a firm that helps people understand how much their house is worth, and kind of like a Zillow, but not quite.
Yeah, for people who want to find out information on their property or properties that they might be interested in purchasing.
So you might have also read a survey that came out exactly the same week as yours that said Santa Cruz is the second most expensive city in the United States to live in. So is there any connection between these two pieces of information, that it's the best place to work from home and that it's also the most expensive? Are people coming from places where maybe they're making more money than locals and they can afford more home to live in? Do you think there's any connection between the high price of housing here? It's not new to us, but I wonder if you could reflect on the connection between these two surveys.
Sure. We in our earlier Zoomtown study, we focused more on affordability, so housing and rent prices. And so in that regard, Santa Cruz didn't come out on top. Places that were people were looking for places that just based on affordability, they were choosing other locations, and a lot of small cities across the United States popped up on that list. But when we zoomed in just on sort of outdoor lifestyle factors, that's where Santa Cruz really shined. So if you, I think remote workers have a little bit more bank to work with. And so maybe in that regard, Santa Cruz, they're not going to shy away from if they can afford to live there. And certainly California struggles with, overall just housing prices. But we do have, the outdoor lifestyle. And I think for maybe workers coming from San Francisco, for example, might find Santa Cruz more affordable than where they were living, and there's a greater access to outdoors. Santa Cruz just has so much
we joke here
available.
about, the view, but there's always a view.
Yeah.
But, how much is that view worth? This new study that's from the National Low Income Housing Coalition rated Santa Cruz, Watsonville area, the number 2 least affordable community for renters in the entire nation. So we get these surveys that come out and they say different things about us. We all know it's beautiful here. That's no surprise. The trend to working from home, I was listening to a market report on the radio that was saying that people are moving to little towns, even smaller, way smaller than Santa Cruz, like Big Sky, Montana, and driving prices through the roof because they can go anywhere.
Right. Yeah, that is definitely a national trend, not just in our area. It's occurring all across the U.S., and it's definitely is driving prices up, which makes it a lot less affordable for those who already live there. But yeah, we do see a trend with people moving to smaller cities and even, smaller towns as well, because when you're coming from someplace where it costs more, those smaller cities seem more affordable and are, attractive in that regard.
And they are to someone who's been paying, $4,000 a month for an apartment as opposed to $3,000. But
Right.
You're right, for firefighters and teachers who already live there. So here's an interesting statistic out of that other survey. The Out of Reach survey says that the hourly rate that a full-time worker must own to afford most rentals here is $60 an hour, and the average county resident income right now is $19. So that's a pretty big gap. And the average 2-bedroom rental is $3,138, meaning people would have to work 4 full-time jobs to afford the rent here. It's
Right.
really showing up a real gap between reality for a lot of people. And who wouldn't want to work from home? A lot of people like it. Not everybody does, and not everyone can, I guess. So what are the occupations that your survey revealed that a lot of these people who are moving from San Francisco or wherever is more expensive, what are they doing from home? What kind of occupation?
Well, I think a lot of people are working, who are able to work from home, are working in more high-tech fields where you're not required to be face-to-face with others on a daily basis. And so those occupations probably pay a lot more and make it a lot easier to be remote and choose where you want to work. So it definitely is occupation specific. Not everybody can work from home, and not everybody has that luxury to be able to do that and then choose where you want to live. So it definitely is occupation specific, more tech fields, data.
Yeah, ironically, I remember, during the worst of the pandemic, I won't say during the pandemic because it's still happening, a lot of people who are essential workers couldn't do what many people did, which is they couldn't work from home, like grocery workers and, medical workers and people like that who were deemed essential, but they could not telecommute, a lot of them. So it kind of showed up these different kinds of occupations that people hold. What are some of the other towns that ended up on the list? Who was second and third? I know Santa Cruz was at the very top.
Well, on this study that we just focused on, outdoor lifestyles, you've got some other towns that pop up, like in Washington. You have Auburn outside of Seattle, has a lot of, it's got over, 33 parks, 26 miles of hiking trails. Really a lot of West Coast smaller cities. So Beaverton, Oregon, as well, outside of Portland, Bellingham, Washington, up along the Canadian border showed up. So these were some of the top cities. So after Santa Cruz were these three. And then, switching over to the other coast, we got Portland, Maine, but also Napa, nearby Napa as well, showed up. So these are some of the top cities on the list.
I wonder if they correlate as closely as Santa Cruz does with the least affordable as well. I'm thinking Napa is not exactly a cheap place to live. I don't know about
Right.
the other cities you mentioned at all in Washington, but interesting that they're all on the West Coast.
Yeah.
What do you make of that, the geographical concentration on the West for people working from home?
Well, when we just focused on affordability as sort of weighted that higher in our study, the West Coast did not come out on top.
This is Talk of the Bay. I'm speaking with Julianne Ohlander. She is part of a study that showed that Santa Cruz is the top city in the nation for people working from home and also wanting an outdoor lifestyle. And my name is Rachel Goodman. We're here on Talk of the Bay on K-Squid, our local community radio station, where we just got, I don't know, it's kind of like a Pyrrhic victory that we are the best town to work from home. It has its ups and downs, really. It's great for some workers, and it can be good for communities because people have flexible schedules and they're not on the roads clogging up the commute. So there's some big pluses to having lots of folks working from home. There could be some negatives besides what we talked about of driving up homes prices, but maybe some of the others are that people don't really have to interact with their local community all that much if they just stay at home and work on their computer. They can be living here, but they're not like volunteering at their local Little League or cleaning up the beach. I mean, we hope they are because they have such a flexible schedule, but I just do wonder because often if you're in a workplace environment, your workplace volunteers with you. And would you like to comment on that particular thing, the community aspect? Because we're big on that here at K-Squid.
Sure. I think, remote workers are just as likely to be volunteers in the community and be a part of the community, maybe even more so because they're seeking out areas like Santa Cruz specifically for a lifestyle. And so I definitely wouldn't count them out as being a part of the community, even though they're not physically in a workplace or, having clients in the area or just being face to face at the workplace. So I think that people who are moving for a specific lifestyle are really maybe even more likely to be, more active because of that.
There's always that, don't love California to death idea that, welcome to California, now go home, we're overcrowded here. But there are people who move here specifically because they're passionate about protecting it. So there's always that tug, the push and pull of loving a place too much, but also people who come here who want to protect it. And so that may be why no one wants to build more houses. I don't know. It's more complicated than that, but it does make you think about the whole dynamic of an attractive place. And what's your sense for every time a town like ours turns up at the top of one of these lists? Does it have a real noticeable impact afterward? Like once this is published nationwide, people go, oh, wow, I want to move there too. Do they know how expensive it is to live here? What do you think about the impact of your own survey?
Well, I think one of the things I was saying before my iPad closed on me was that in our previous study, we focused on more economic factors. And so you were getting a lot of towns popping up throughout the U.S., like Lancaster, Pennsylvania popped up on the top, Dalton, Georgia, McAllen, Texas. And those were based on weighting, rent and cost of housing more. So people who were working remote and were really just looking for a new place to live and were mostly concerned with the economic factors, these were good places to move to. But when we sort of put that aside a little bit and focus more on the outdoors aspect of that, that's where you started getting the West Coast popping up again, because West Coast did not come out on affordability. But when you put that aside, you do start seeing all these West Coast towns like Santa Cruz and Napa and towns up in Oregon and Washington. So,
yeah, great. Well, that's really interesting. And I appreciate you coming on and just sort of peeling back some of the layers of what some of this data means. Because when you see these surveys, you go, oh, that's interesting. But understanding them through subsequent surveys is even more interesting. So I want to thank you, Julianne Ohlander, for being here with us and looking at this latest survey. And do keep in touch if Santa Cruz pops up on the top of any other lists. We want to know about it. So thank you so much for being here with us on Talk of the Bay. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, we will be looking at, other sort of subpopulations like working parents and young professionals. So it'll be interesting to see who pops up on those lists as well in the future.
Indeed. All right. Well, you have a good evening. Thanks so much for joining us here.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.